Finally tonight, we're going to take a closer look at one of the most influential American priests of the 20th century. Father Ted Hesburgh served as president of the University of Notre Dame for 35 years, but his reach extended far beyond the bounds of academia. My next guest was a personal friend of Hesburgh's, and he's also his biographer. Please welcome the author of American Priest, The Ambitious Life and Conflicted Legacy of Notre Dame's Father Ted Hesburgh. Father Bill Miscamble, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Raymond. A pleasure to be with you.
Father, tell me, how did you come to write this biography, particularly since others have already written biographies of Father Hesburgh, including his own memoir, God, Country, and Notre Dame? Why was it important to do another look at this life?
Well, initially, Raymond, I began this project as a way of trying to understand the journey that Catholic higher education in general and Notre Dame in particular had been on in the decades since I had been involved in the 1970s, 80s, and into the 1990s. I first identified that I wanted to do this study of Father Hesburgh, and I brought it to him in the 1990s. And it was out of a quest to understand what had happened in higher education and what had happened at Notre Dame, such that the whole issue of Catholic mission and Catholic identity had become a contested issue. And I thought studying the Hesburgh story would allow me to get at that, and I believe it has.
What kind of friendship and relationship did you have with Father Ted? I mean, you're part of the same order. Tell me how you introduced the project to him.
We are both priests in the Congregation of Holy Cross. Of course, we're both based at Notre Dame. Father Hesburgh spent 70 years of his life there, and now it's hard to believe I'm coming up on having spent close to 40 years of my own life at Notre Dame. I was serving in the history department in the 1990s. I was chairing the department at the time when this idea really coalesced that I would write this study of Father Hesburgh. I knew that I would not be able to do it right away, but I was aware, Raymond, that I needed to interview him, to get him on the record. And so one evening I called him up. He was working away in his office. Folks familiar with Notre Dame know that after his retirement, he had a spacious office on the 13th floor of what is now the Hesburgh Library. And I was working in my office, and I called him up. He said, "Come on over." And I came over and I introduced the idea to him. He had some questions about it, but we eventually agreed that he would cooperate with me. It's not an authorized biography, but he gave me cooperation on the project. And so then we had a drink to cement the arrangement. And dare I say, we started talking and kept talking for the next 2 hours. So that was the original occasion for the book getting underway.
And you interviewed him many times in 1998, right?
In 1998, we had extended interviews up at the Land O'Lakes property. Some of your viewers who are familiar with the Land O'Lakes statement, that place would resonate with them. But we flew up to Land O'Lakes, and I interviewed him over 6 successive nights. Father Hesburgh was very much a night person. He liked to sleep late and then to work late. And so he would actually go out fishing with the caretaker up there and come back, and from about 9 o'clock until 1:30, 2 o'clock, we would have these extended interview sessions, and I have him on tape for about 25 to 30 hours, something like that. And those interviews, which I have, of course, kept, they are a key part of the research for this book, but of course have been supplemented by other materials in his papers and various other sources.
Father, I want to go to the heart of your book, and we have to back up a little bit for this. Father Ted Hesburgh was really a priest of the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council. Tell me how he approached that council and his arrival at Notre Dame as president in 1952?
1952. So in some ways he spans the Council, Raymond. He experiences life prior to the Second Vatican Council, and then, of course, is much influenced by it and sees himself as implementing much of the sort of teaching of the Council, which I'll come to in a minute. But he has a very rapid rise at Notre Dame, is made president at age 35, and he's leading Notre Dame. In those days, the presidency of the university was held in conjunction with the superiorship of the local community. Now, the superiorship of the Holy Cross Order at Notre Dame is limited by canon law to 6 years. So Father Ted initially thought he was going to have 6 years in the job, so he wanted to make a mark. He's an extraordinarily talented and energetic person. But he sets off to build Notre Dame. He has this grand ambition that he wants to build Notre Dame as the great Catholic university. And he gets engaged in that undertaking and effort. I try and detail this in the book. In 1958, however, he is renewed as president, and the two positions are separated off. Someone else becomes the local superior, and Father Hesburgh continues his leadership of the university. The current of reform is in the air once Pope John the 23rd is elected as our pontiff, and Father Hesburgh is cheering Vatican II along. He's not a delegate to the Second Vatican Council, but he sees documents like Gaudium et Spes, etc., as deeply, deeply important and fulfilling the kind of vision that he has. And he sees that he wants to expand the role of the laity, certainly one of the great themes of Vatican II. And this is part of then how he tries to guide Notre Dame in those years subsequent to the Council. He sees himself very much as fulfilling what the Council had laid out.
Well, he certainly expands the university, turns it into one of the premier Catholic institutions in the country, and nothing perhaps is more seismic or influential on Catholic education writ large than the Land O'Lakes Statement, which he guides in 1967. Tell me about that and how, in your mind, this may have been one of the tensions in his legacy and perhaps black marks.
Yes. Here is where my subtitle, The Conflicted Legacy of Father Ted Hesburgh, comes into play. So there's a kind of contradiction at work in Father Hesburgh. He wants to build the great Catholic university. But he is concerned about needing to acknowledge the authority of the institutional church. And so at Land O'Lakes, he and a number of other Catholic educators, leaders in Catholic education, many of them Jesuit priests, they were pretty much all priests there, essentially have this declaration of independence in which they say, we only acknowledge the authority of the academic community. And so you have this strange circumstance where the people who are trying to build a great Catholic university essentially want to separate themselves off from the authority of the church. And then over the subsequent years, Raymond, as you would be well aware from all of your reporting over the years, Catholic higher education has gone in some complex and sometimes negative directions where the secularizing process has been at work, because these institutions, in a quest for prestige, they wanted acceptance by the secular academic establishment, they are becoming more and more mirror images of that establishment. Now, for Father Hesburgh, he certainly wanted to keep Notre Dame Catholic, and a lot, you visited the campus recently, there's an incredible Catholic feel to the university, the basilica, the chapels and the dorms, etc. But the central academic project has lost some of its distinctiveness, whether or not we're providing for our students the kind of Catholic education that we promise is a big question mark. And I think you can trace that back to the Land O'Lakes statement and development subsequent to it.
Father Hesburgh, as you note in the book, he was very close to Pope Paul VI, but Humane Vitae, on that issue, he was something of a dissenter. He was not at all pleased with that papal exhortation.
Exactly. He was a quiet dissenter. He didn't come out in any public way, the way some theologians did, et cetera, et cetera. But you're absolutely right. There was a real bond and friendship, almost a brotherhood, between Father Hesburgh, who met the then Cardinal Montini in 1960. They hit it off so well, and this bond and friendship continued after Paul VI became Pope. But Father Hesburgh leaned very much, he was influenced by his membership on the Rockefeller Foundation board. He worried about the population issue and was expecting that Paul VI would permit artificial birth control. So he was surprised when Humane Vitae came down, and there began to be a distance. There was some dispute between Father Hesburgh and certain Vatican officials, and there was a rupture in the friendship. It's a sad story in some way, because these two men who had enjoyed each other's company, essentially there's no real reconciliation prior to Paul VI's death, although Father Hesburgh told me that whenever he visited Rome subsequently, he always went to pray at Paul VI's, at the where he's buried there, at the crypt there where the popes are buried. He always prayed there, fulfilling a promise that he had made to Paul VI, that whenever he was in Rome, he would visit him.
Father Miscamble, before I run out of time, first of all, tell me how this book has been received. I know that in the world of Notre Dame, among the Domers, Father Hesburgh is, considered a minor deity at this point. Writing a critical but loving work like this, I imagine has drawn you a number of critics within the Notre Dame family.
Well, Raymond, it's still early days. It's still early days. The book has just been released, so I'm very grateful for you to give me the opportunity to speak about it with you on your program.
Sure.
Look, you're onto something. You know the game. I expect my book will play to somewhat mixed reviews at Notre Dame. Father Hesburgh had reached a certain iconic status in those final decades of his life, and there's been what I call the sort of hagiographical school, people writing hagiographical literature about him. But I had promised Father Hesburgh, I would write a serious book about him in which I would try and evaluate with fairness his contribution at Notre Dame and his contributions in American public life, where of course he's such an important figure on the civil rights issue and various other
Marched with
public
MLK
policy issues. And I hope that my colleagues and friends at Notre Dame will understand that Father Hesburgh deserves a serious biography, and that's what I've tried to provide. But Raymond, like you, I'm curious to find out what the reception will be at Notre Dame. I'm having an event there in a week or so.
Oh, good.
So we'll see what happens.
Father, tell me about the long-reaching impact. I mean, the book captures really Father Hesburgh's impact on Catholic education, and certainly the tension I would describe between Our Lady and his visions for Notre Dame. How do you see that influence extending to Catholic higher education today? Was that the turning point that, if you will, unleashed so many of the secularizing forces we see in Catholic education? And what of that do you still see at Notre Dame as we speak?
Well, I do see that some of the decisions made by Father Hesburgh, sometimes without him fully realizing what the consequences would be, set us in some of these directions. Because, Raymond, if you want acceptance by the secular academic establishment, you begin after a time to sort of mirror yourself on what they do. You want to be ranked with them, you want to be measured in their company, etc. So that began to send Notre Dame in that direction. Now, this has reached proportions today where at Notre Dame there are still so many terrific faculty who are deeply committed to building a Catholic university, and there are so many good aspects to the campus. But nonetheless, there's this tension operating whether or not we're going to be fully Catholic, commit ourselves to Ex Corde Ecclesiae as our guiding charter, rather than to Land O'Lakes. That's the shift we have to acknowledge and make if we're going to truly claim our Catholic identity. And of course, this surfaces in lots of ways. We've had a recent episode in which there's the talk of covering up. I don't know if you've reported on it or not.
Yes, about the
covering up of the Columbus murals.
Yeah,
that's a reflection. That's a reflection, I think, of the influence of a certain level of political correctness at Notre Dame, that we would cover up these murals that celebrate the bringing of the Gospels to the New World out of some desire to placate criticism and to scapegoat Christopher Columbus. It's not a good approach. I'm a historian. It's not a good approach to history to undertake such a move.
Father, in 2009, you and Father Hesburgh got into something of a controversy, not that you invited it, but Father Hesburgh and Notre Dame honored Barack Obama that year. You publicly disagreed with that decision. How did that affect your relationship?
Now, Father Hesburgh was not involved in the inviting of President Obama or the honoring of him, but he was very proud to participate in the ceremony. President Obama acknowledged him. For Father Ted, he saw the visit of the first African-American president as a kind of culmination of his efforts on civil rights, sort of a recognition that African Americans had truly made it in American society. But I took a somewhat different approach. I did not think that a Catholic university should be honoring a president who was so strongly pro-abortion and was facilitating various pro-abortion policies and activities, and opposed. So Father Ted and myself, we found ourselves on different sides, but it's a quality of him as a person. It never meant a rupture in our friendship. I would say he was an older man by that point, and I certainly wasn't going to bring it up to him for argument or anything of that sort. So we essentially agreed to disagree and maintained just a decent personal relationship.
Father Bill, before I let you go, do you see a turning, if you will, toward your vision at this point and the vision of the Church, in that the students, I mean, when I visit Notre Dame, I see students who are suddenly more orthodox than certainly my generation, and when I visit other universities of Catholic pedigree, I find the Notre Dame expression to be more solid and widespread than at a place like Georgetown or some other colleges I visited.
Yes, we're very fortunate in the students who come to Notre Dame. I would say there's a core of these students who are deeply involved and have come to Notre Dame seeking a true Catholic education. And it must be our task to try and serve them well and provide that for them. There's perhaps a larger group who are glad to be at Notre Dame, who are Catholic, etc. But our task for them is to draw them into a deeper engagement with their faith and with Catholic learning. So we have the task ahead, but certainly the kinds of committed students that perhaps are connected to, say, the Center for Ethics and Culture, etc., those students are a great hope for Notre Dame.
Final question, I have to mention this. In your homeland of Australia, we talked about it earlier in the show, Cardinal George Pell convicted, this being the third trial of George Pell. Your take on this as a native Aussie?
Yes, well, I am saddened by the court decision. I do not see how a jury reviewing the evidence that was before them could reach the verdict that that jury did. I fear that the toxic atmosphere created in certain parts of the media in Australia has made it almost impossible for Cardinal Pell to receive a fair trial, although, Raymond, you'd be aware from all of your own reading, at the first trial, Cardinal Pell had a jury verdict come down 10-2 to exonerate him.
Right.
That gives you a sense that there was just something amiss in this second trial. I can only hope and pray that the appeals process works well and quickly, and that Cardinal Pell, whom I strongly believe in his innocence, is restored to his ministry in the church. Please keep him in your prayers.
Father Miscamble, I thank you for being here. The book is American Priest, The Ambitious Life and Conflicted Legacy of Notre Dame's Father Ted Hesburgh, by Father Bill, or on the cover, Father Wilson Miscamble. Thank you for being here. It's in bookstores everywhere and online.